Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'm going to teach you enough about graphing in slope-intercept form to get through that 4.5 worksheet I had handed you today in class. Basically, we're going to graph the lines using only the slope and the intercept information, nothing else. We're not going to make tables, we're not going to find the x and y intercept and graph it. We're just going to use the slope and the intercept. Basically, in order to do that, we have to get it into y equals mx plus b form, your favorite form in the world, and then use that form to identify the m and the b values. Now, if you don't have this formula in your head, memorized, in a book, somewhere easily accessible, please pause this video and write this down right here. If you look at this equation, it's basically got two terms. You got it in function form, so y all by itself equals something times x. So there's some number times x plus some letter or number, in this case, added on to the variable that is not multiplied by x. The slope of the function will always be that number that's multiplied by x. That's your rate, that's your change. All those things mean the same thing. So the number that is multiplied by x will be your slope. The number that is not multiplied by x, or that is added on to it, will be this b value, and this b value is going to stand for your intercept. This is the y value of the y-intercept when we use it to graph. So what we're going to do is we're going to solve the equation for y. We're going to identify m and b values, and yes, you do have to write that on the worksheet, and then we're going to use only this information to graph it. So here is number 3 on your worksheet. The first thing you'll notice is that our function is not in function form. We want it to be in slope-intercept form right up there. So the first thing we have to do is get it in function form, which means, and we've done this many times now, subtracting a 4x from both sides. Once you do that, you'll have negative y equals negative 2 minus 4x. So we have negative y equals negative 2 minus 4x. Just like that. Now, this is not quite function form yet because we do not yet have y all by itself. Remember that if we have a negative in front of a variable, really the coefficient in front of there is a negative 1. So we can do this a number of ways. A lot of people like dividing by a negative 1. Some people like multiplying by a negative 1, or some people just like thinking that it's the same as changing the sign on everything else. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to divide each thing by a negative 1, since that's the way most people think. But you can go through and change the sign on everything, or you can divide by a negative 1 or multiply by a negative 1. When you're done with that, you get y equals 2 plus 4x. So I've changed the sign on everything. Now that is our new equation. It is in function form because I have y all by itself. The other good news is that we're also in slope-intercept form, though slightly rearranged. You'll notice that the 4, that will be our m value right there, because it is multiplied by x. So if I go down here and hit 4, that will be our slope for the day, for this problem. And the number that is not multiplied by the x is the 2, so that is my intercept. Now, sometimes the problems on the homework will ask you for an intercept. Sometimes they'll ask you for the actual whole coordinate. This gives us the point 0, 2. And we're going to use this information to help graph it. Okay. So, in order to graph something like this, which you now have graphs on the back page of the worksheet, we are only going to use this information. And the way we're going to do that is we are basically going to start here. Okay, we start at our intercept this time, so I can go ahead and actually plot that point right there at 0, 2. And I can barely see that, but that's okay. And then I'm going to get to the next point by following my slope. Now, if you look at my slope here, it's not in rise over run format, but we can change that very easily by putting that over 1. So now I have 4 over 1, and remember we're rise over run. So that means that from this point, I'm going to go up 4 and over 1 and make my second point. And just to remind remind you that you can also do it the other direction by going the opposite direction, down 4 and back 1 to get a third or fourth or even fifth point if you want. I would like you to have at least 2 of them on your sheet of paper when you hand it in. Connect your dots with a straight edge, please, and there is your line with a slope of positive 4 going through the point 0, 2. Okay. Here's a second example. I'd like you to pause the video and try it yourself. Solve it in function form, or get it in function form, identify a slope and an intercept, and then graph it. Okay, if you've solved correctly, the first thing you've done, either in 2 steps or in 1, is you've subtracted a 7x from both sides and added a 3 to both sides. That'll get you 2y equals 3 minus 7x. We've all done this a million times. At this point, you need to divide each and every term by 2. Make sure you divide every term by 2, not just the ones that you're most interested in. And then if you do that, you'll get a couple fractions, but that's okay. Fractions are our friend in slope-intercept form because the fraction will actually tell us something, okay? So now we have a slope of negative 7 halves, and that negative belongs to either the top or the bottom, but not both. So our slope is negative 7 halves because that is the number that is multiplied by x. And our intercept, a little weird that it's a fraction, but that's okay, we'll deal with it, is 3 halves, okay? So doing this, we should be able to graph our line very well now. Our intercept of 3 halves and our slope of 7 halves, or a slope of negative 7 halves. So our intercept of 3 halves is right about there. And our slope tells us to go down 7 and over 2. So I'm going to go down 7, and remember we're at 3 or 1.5 there, so we're going to count the middle of the squares here. So I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and to the right 2. And I'm going to make another dot. I believe your worksheet has a 10 by 10 grid rather than a 7 by 7 grid, so I think you can go get a third point by going the other direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and over 2. Yours will look a little bit like that. Obviously, I'm off the grid just a little bit. Connect the dots with a straight edge. That's good enough. And you're on your way. So, the general idea here, solve for function form, solve for y, identify your slope, identify your intercept, use your intercept as your first point, and then move from there in order to get to your second point. You can make a third or fourth or as many as you need in order to finish up. There are a couple weird ones, okay, like this one. Y equals 4x. It doesn't appear to have a b value, but really what that is a plus 0 there. So what that really means is that your slope is the 4 and your b value, your intercept, is 0. So this one you will start at the origin and you will go up 4 over 1 or back 1 down 4, however you want to phrase that. There's a couple other weird ones like this one where this one's often tricky for a handful of students. This really has a negative 1 in front. So your slope is negative 1 or negative 1 over 1, and you still have that plus 0 hanging out. So you have, again, an intercept of 0, or it goes through the origin. A couple other weird ones. Y equals negative 4 does not have an x in there whatsoever. So what this is it's a 0 times x minus 4. So what that means is you have a slope of 0. Now if you remember back a couple sections ago, a slope of 0 means a horizontal line. So this is another way of thinking about a horizontal line. The horizontal line that you're going to draw will go through the point 0, negative 4, and it has a slope of 0. So we're going to go down to negative 4, and it has a slope of 0, which is a horizontal line altogether. And that's another way of thinking how to graph a horizontal line. A slope of 0 and whatever intercept it gives you. The final and last weird one that you just have to remember, because you can't really think of it in terms of slope and intercept, would be a vertical line, and that's where you have x equals a single number. And in that case, your line will be vertical this time at 5. This next test that you have will have an entire page on vertical and horizontal lines. It is one of our standards, so you do need to know it regardless of how well you do on it. So, to finish up that packet 4.5 for tomorrow, and I will give you some time to work in class. There will be some time, but we do have to talk about other things like domain and range tomorrow. Have a good evening. I hope you've enjoyed this.